from comp to boulder to highball to big wall to sport, you've put these chapters of focus in your life on them. Is the training plan for each one to just go and do the thing a ton, kind of the Chris Sharma training plan, or do you write yourself a program, a specific training program, off the wall program that's going to help to level you up to get into that thing?
Yeah, both and. So I write my own training programs for now that I've been sport climbing. So I switched to sport climbing in part because I reached a pretty big plateau in my bouldering. Felt like I had all the strength training in the world, I wasn't seeing any results. And so I've started sport climbing, and I changed my training plan to reflect way more power endurance, strength endurance specifically, not necessarily power endurance. There's a slight difference. But I kind of in my head, I don't know how true this is, like scientifically or physiologically, but in my head, I have this like pyramid of energy, and the tippy top being all the strength and power. And then middle of the pyramid is like strength endurance, and then the bottom being endurance. So I guess it's like the triangle of capacity, how much capacity I could have. And all of my focus was in the strength and power part. But I think I hit a plateau in part because I had no access, no capacity in the power endurance and more in the endurance base because I just had never worked those areas. So now that I never needed to, climbing like short stuff, mostly short stuff. But then when I started, I guess like when I got into highballing, and then now that I'm in sport climbing, I was like, oh, I have such a larger reservoir of energy and strength endurance. And I'm convinced that's actually helping my bouldering a little bit right now. I'm starting to get back into bouldering. I want to get back into bouldering. I have some like bigger bouldering goals I want to revisit. And so part of that process has been, how can I expand my energy reservoir so that I can continue to push myself and like expand my strength in a way that still complements like everything else, my sport climbing and my trad climbing.
What are your go-to training interventions or kind of methodologies for training like top end power, like finger strength or power, whichever, strength, the ability to kind of carry a heavy load and power a load at speed, I think, right, is kind of what we typically would talk about in that world. And then endurance, essentially being able to climb moderate to, slightly more than moderate stuff just forever.
With training, you find out what works for you, what you can do on a consistent basis, something that's simple enough for you to do consistently. That's it. That's all you got to do for training. Simplicity and consistency. It doesn't have to be that crazy. But in that same vein, there's a lot of options. So I'll try and keep it short. So for power and strength, my go-tos, campus board, moon board, and fingerboarding. And then for power endurance, I've been really into drop sets. So for instance, for hangboarding, you will hang for say 5 seconds with a ton of weight, and then you drop the weight. You drop, maybe 50% of the weight or something, and then you hang for another like 8 to 10 seconds. Or if you're doing weighted pull-ups, you do 3 max weighted pull-ups with a bunch of weight, and then you drop some of the weight and you do another like 8 pull-ups or so, or maybe 5 pull-ups. Because that simulates what you would be doing on a route. You're like putting a lot of energy, trying really hard for a short period of time, and then you still have to climb afterwards. Right. You still have to continue putting energy out.
Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching these videos. Quick 30 seconds to tell you about the Patreon that I've started to help fund this massive operation running out of my podcast/YouTube/utility closet, which I'm coming to you from right here. Check out the Patreon down below. I've got pro clinics with some of the biggest names in the sport, exclusive for patrons, helping you learn how to level up on your training and your performance, all sorts of other bonus content. Appreciate your support. Check it out.
The drop set format, I've also used that with weightlifting. So for China Beach, I did a lot of dumbbell rows because I wanted to increase my lat strength. And so I would do like between 3 to 5 reps with like 60 pounds. And then I would drop the weight to like 30, 25 and do another 8 to 10 reps just to keep that pump going.
Yeah. How many sets are you doing of that drop sets typically?
So the first, I generally follow in a 4-week training plan. I'll do like 3 sets the first week, and then I do 4 sets the next week, and then I do 5 and 5 the last 2 weeks.
Cool.
So progressive overload, just always adding a little bit more. Some of the best sport climbing advice I ever received was from my friend, Michaela Kirsch. Love her. Shout out, Michaela.
Crushing.
She's such a crusher, dude. It's incredible. And I have learned so much from that girl. One of the things being, she told me that endurance climbing is not about how long you can climb for. It's how much you can recover and how much you can get back in a rest.
Yeah.
That's what endurance climbing adds up to. And, again, I've only been consistently sport climbing for the last 3 years now, and I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into the mechanics and science of endurance climbing. But ultimately, I was able to do Zulu, probably my longest endurance climb, and a lot of other longer climbs because I would learn how to rest. So I would on good holds, but also bad holds. You get into these weird body positions. You learn how to drop your knee, get your hip into the wall, and breathe and relax your gaze. Arno Ilner, I always love to reference Arno because he's got the body scan where you just find a point right in front of your eyes and you gaze at the rock and you relax your face and you take a lot of deep breaths and you just mentally reset yourself. And I think that has a physiological effect on how to get back some of that pump. With the caveat, too, that you have done the proper strength and strength endurance training to be able to facilitate that type of calmness.
Sure. And do you train rests then somehow or awkward rest? Is that trainable? How do you work that?
So I'll train it in the gym a lot where I'll climb. I'll have it, there are volume days where you do doubles or triples. Sometimes you just go through each route and routes that are a little bit below your on-site level. But then you have project days where you try harder routes and you're climbing, and you get to a point where you're trying really hard and you're redlining. And instead of taking the fall, instead of going a muerte and trying to send, you actually grab onto a jug. You grab onto, or just a hold on another route. Mm-hmm. And instead of taking that fall, you are now off route and you find a position where you start to gain some of that pump back. So you try to lower your heart rate, mentally bring yourself back to a state of calmness as much as you can. And then once you feel like you've gotten some of that energy back, you get back on your route and you try and climb as much as you can. And you basically keep doing that. So you try not to fall. You just you try not to fall before your red line moment hits, and you practice it that way.